My parents missed my wedding because of my brother's football game, the favorite. Now karma has caught up with them, and their lives won't be the same. Buckle up, this is going to be a bit long. I'm 27F, and I have a younger brother, Mike, 21M. He's the definition of a man-child and a mama's boy, always whining, always expecting others to bend over backwards for him. Generally, he's a jerk. Since he was born, my parents have been obsessed with him. He has no special needs, no traumatic birth, nothing like that. He was just born, and my parents completely sidelined me. My mother, 50F, especially went from being a loving mom to one of those boy moms people mock online. My father, 50M, still showed me some love and support, but he's always been too spineless to stand up to my mother and let me win for once. The only person who supported me was my grandfather, 76M, who always called out my parents' nonsense and never liked my brother. I remind him of his late wife, my grandmother, and we have a special bond, but he lives on the other side of the country, so I couldn't see him often. Mike knows our mother prefers him and loves rubbing it in my face, which is why we've always clashed. He's a spoiled, bratty, awful human being. I can't count how many times I got in trouble for things I did better than him or for things he pinned on me. His only talent is his football skills, which earned him a scholarship to a good out-of-state university. My parents didn't spend a dime on my education because, apparently, my college fund was used to cover expenses after a fire, only for me to find out years later that they gave it to Mike for a car and a house. At the public university, I met Lucas, the first person who really clicked with me there. I also met new people who are now my closest friends, and thanks to them and Lucas, who was my best friend for years before we got together, I managed to move out of my parents' house. Now, both Lucas and I are well known in our fields and earn great salaries. Now to the main point. Lucas proposed a year ago. We're private people, so we didn't post it on social media or anything. And when I told my parents, they brushed it off with a how nice, making me think they didn't even pay attention. We decided on a simple but beautiful ceremony and reception with friends and family. Lucas convinced me to invite my parents and brother, but they never RSVP'd. Every time I visited and tried to talk about my wedding without explicitly saying it was a wedding, my mother would talk over me about Mike's achievements and wild adventures. I got fed up and interrupted her once to say I was planning an event with a non-negotiable date. She said they couldn't attend because Mike had his final game of the season that day, and they wanted to be there. This favoritism didn't surprise me. They missed my ballets, shows, and both my high school and college graduations for his stuff. At that point, I decided to be petty. I told both parents it was fine if they missed this event, deliberately omitting that it was my wedding, and didn't push further. A few weeks ago, I got married. It was perfect. My family, Lucas's family, and our friends were there, and we had a blast. My grandfather was thrilled to walk me down the aisle, and everything was perfect. My relatives asked several times why my parents weren't there, and I honestly said they had to attend Mike's game and couldn't come. They gave me odd looks, and my grandfather was visibly upset for a while, but nothing else seemed off. After the reception, Lucas and I went on our honeymoon and stayed off our phones the whole time. But when we got back, a storm was waiting. I turned on my phone and couldn't even unlock it before a flood of notifications hit. Most were from my mother and Mike, who was calling me names and insulting me because, apparently, one of my paternal aunts posted wedding photos on Facebook with a blatant dig at my parents, especially my mother for missing it. The post went viral in their community, and they've been publicly shamed for their treatment of me. It also turns out my grandfather personally visited my parents to chew them out, reducing my father, his son, to tears. This seemed to be my father's breaking point, as he was so distraught about missing his only daughter's wedding and his father's disapproval that he finally stood up to my mother, threatening divorce unless she makes it up to me. I think that's why my mother has been bombarding my phone with messages, first insulting and threatening, then pitiful, full of pleas and sympathy. Now I'm home with my husband, figuring out how to handle this. Most of my relatives, even those I didn't invite, reached out to apologize for what I've been through, saying they had no idea what was happening at home. I can't blame them. They all live with my grandfather across the country or in another state. But my mother's sisters and friends are shaming me for not telling her about the wedding, saying she's inconsolable about missing it. I think she's just saving face, but I'm not sure. My parents' latest messages seem genuinely sad and hurt about missing my wedding. Now my family is split 3 ways. Most siding with me, my maternal aunts shaming me for hurting my mother's feelings, and my maternal grandparents insisting I forgive her given her remorse. My best friends tell me to ignore them. Thanks for the comments and love. It's overwhelming. To address popular questions, yes, I informed my parents about my wedding. I sent traditional paper invitations to all guests, and I was notified they were delivered. I got no response from my parents or Mike, a few distant relatives, and some of Lucas's people. I followed up via text with everyone who didn't respond, and those who replied said they couldn't come. I texted my parents and Mike, but they didn't answer. I let it go, knowing them, and with all the wedding planning I had to do. I didn't keep reiterating the date since they'd already said there was a game. Plus, every time I try to highlight my celebrations to get a response, they'd say it wasn't important and to stop being pushy because some things were more important than me. At this point, I think it's fair I didn't press further. It's not worth the effort. I didn't keep my wedding a secret. I chose not to explicitly tell my parents it was my wedding to see if they cared at all, but surprise, they didn't. Still, I openly discussed my wedding with my aunts. My mother was in the room a few times when I talked about venues or dress shops with my aunt, the one who posted on Facebook, but she was either on the phone or chatting with others, never paying attention. When I brought it up at gatherings, she'd smile and say, "That's nice, honey," then change the subject. For my dad and Mike, total silence. I kept in touch with them because every time I tried to go no contact in recent years, they harassed me. I tried after my high school, undergrad, and master's graduations, which they skipped for Mike-related reasons, and each time I was shamed for turning my back on family by my parents, Mike, my maternal aunts, and grandparents. I think the turning point is that Lucas wasn't by my side during those earlier attempts. We started dating shortly after my last try, and having him now makes me feel more secure in my stance. But I want to be sure. As I said, my paternal side lives across the country and wasn't aware of how I was treated. I tried reporting my parents once at 14, and my uncles and grandfather scolded them. They pretended to be sorry, but once home, I got the beating and lecture of my life for lying. After that, I kept regular contact with my paternal side, but omitted my parents' abuse out of fear, which still haunts me. Only my grandfather knew, but they threatened to keep him away from me if he did anything. My parents and I aren't from the same city. I live an hour away in a city, and they don't know my new address because Mike once tried to break into my apartment to steal money, and my mother backed him, saying siblings share. Now I've moved, and I'll make sure they don't know where I live. My parents didn't buy Mike a car and house before high school. They got him a car at 16 and a house near his university for his freshman year. They didn't spend my college fund right away. They lied about it, saving it for Mike later. Update, 9 days later. First, I want to thank everyone who cared about my story and wished my husband and me a happy life. I'm beyond grateful for your reassuring messages, love, and comments. The response was overwhelming. To those who think my story is fake, I'm glad your family life is better than mine. To the point you see my reality as fiction, but I'd appreciate it if you stopped harassing me, claiming I'm writing a fake story for attention. If I missed details in the original post, it's because I was overwhelmed and crying my eyes out for my family's harassment. You're not obligated to read my story or believe it, but a little decency would be nice. To clarify, yes, the invitation explicitly said it was a wedding, no excuses. My maternal family didn't attend the wedding. Sorry for not clarifying. Most were busy, and the rest gave excuses to send gifts but not come. Don't ask why they didn't discuss my wedding with my mother. I don't live in their heads. My mother's remorse is her texting apologies. Now for the update. Things have been wild this past week. I stepped away from the app for a couple of days to sort my thoughts, then had a long talk with Lucas about how to move forward. He's been my rock, and I don't think I could love him more. My parents have always been a taboo topic, but he gave me the brutal reality check I needed. We concluded that staying in contact and not being able to let go isn't healthy. I realized I kept contact because, deep down, I just wanted their approval, even now, just once. Pathetic, I know, but it's like a drug with my parents. They can be loving, fun, attentive, and warm until they're not. The little love they give makes you crave more, and you want their approval so badly you destroy yourself. But enough. I promised myself things would change. I reflected and decided to start therapy and cut contact with everyone who made an issue of this for good this time. After days of thinking about how I feel, I texted my dad to say if he wanted to talk, I'd meet him, Mom, and Mike in a neutral place the next day. He replied instantly and agreed, so we met at a park. My dad's siblings came along to keep things in check. My dad looked distraught, like he'd been crying for a while. My mother looked the same, but more out of anger and shame. Mike looked annoyed. I told all three that their behavior and favoritism toward Mike always hurt me, and their abusive actions made me realize I didn't want contact with them after this meeting. My mother tried interrupting several times, but my aunt, the one who posted on Facebook, shut her down each time. When I asked why they treated me this way, they didn't know what to say. My dad kept crying and apologizing without giving answers, and my uncle scolded him. My mother seemed to consider it for the first time, but ultimately just said she didn't like me, plain and simple. Mike! He just enjoyed the attention and making me miserable as a sport. I kept asking questions. When I asked why they never responded to my invitation, they claimed they never got it. I showed them the texts, but they denied receiving those too. Turns out, they didn't get my wedding invitation. When it arrived, they weren't home. Only Mike was visiting for the weekend. He saw it, tore it up, and threw it away. Then, when I texted, he deleted the messages. It wasn't hard. He said their chat with me was archived, so they didn't get notifications. So my parents never got a formal invitation. I was distraught. I asked Mike why he did it, and he shrugged, saying it wasn't as important as their plans anyway. I had to stop Lucas from punching him. Oddly, my parents got mad and started scolding him. He threw a tantrum and cried crocodile tears, and I'll admit I felt some satisfaction. But then my mother said it was all resolved, no need to complain over a misunderstanding, and it was time for me to clear her name. That enraged me, and I cut her off, saying they weren't forgiven at all. Mike destroying the invitation didn't erase their neglect. Plus, it was obvious I was getting married, and they should have asked. My mother's response. She said she heard me talk about my wedding but thought I was delusional and seeking attention with exaggerated scenarios, convinced Lucas didn't like me and would never marry me. I nearly lost it. Another thing came up. Mike didn't have a game. My parents used the fact that my husband, friends, and I know little about football, and that I stopped asking about it after Mike mocked me in high school to make up a story to skip my event. At the time of my first post, I couldn't confirm or deny a game since Mike's social media is private, and Lucas and I are blocked. I took my parents' word for it. But no, they went to Disneyland because Mike wanted to. They used the football story to cover his 100th tantrum vacation, and apparently, they've done this multiple times recently. At that point, I was burned out and overwhelmed by this information. The fact that I'd been so deceived and naive made my blood boil and I exploded. I stood up and told my dad he was a sad, weak man who couldn't stand up for his kids unless his wife approved. To Mike, I said he was a jerk, a pathetic excuse for a man who'd never amount to anything, always living as a spoiled leech. To my mom, I said she was the worst, narcissistic, pathetic woman on earth, not even worth judging for her irrelevance, too rotten for even God to help. Harsh, I know. My mother stood to yell mid-rant, but I was too angry. I screamed at her to shut up for once, sit down and listen. She was so mad I thought steam would come out of her ears. I don't remember much after that, just that I kept talking, letting all my rage and pain spill out. At some point, the whole park went silent. I told my parents and Mike I was done with them and that if they were smart, they'd think twice before contacting me again. I grabbed my bag and left with Lucas, Anna, and Fuences, leaving my parents and brother to my aunts and uncles. The reality of what I'd learned and said hit me, and I had a panic attack on the way home. Lucas was driving, so Anna helped until we pulled into a parking lot to calm me down. I'm beyond grateful for their help. At home, I collapsed in bed and slept. I wanted to follow your advice and post everything on Facebook, but given my job and career, I couldn't expose myself like that. Sharing anonymously here is one thing, putting my name and face out there is another. Instead, I did something better. I compiled all my mother's nasty insults, messages, and comments and sent them to her church's leader. It's a tight-knit community she worked hard to join, but they're brutally critical, and being shunned is a death sentence. And that's exactly what happened. Like clockwork, the scandal spread from the church to the rest of their small town. You can imagine what that means for my parents. After my outburst, I got more messages from my maternal family, further shaming me for upsetting their sister or daughter and insulting her. I didn't care anymore, so I followed your advice and told them they're no longer part of my life, and they can say whatever they want, but I don't care. They should be grateful I didn't send their nasty messages to their bosses and spouses. I've blocked them all, grandparents included, everywhere. I got a long message from my dad apologizing for not being strong enough to stand up to my mother, agreeing I was right, and saying he couldn't believe he missed so much of my life because of her. He said he's divorcing her regardless of my decision because he's tired of being controlled. He wants a relationship to make up for lost years. I replied that I don't want to see or forgive him right now. He said he'd do everything to win me back and loves me. I told him I find that hard to believe and blocked him. Frankly, his attempt to get out of this by throwing my mother under the bus is pathetic. At least she owned her awfulness. He just blames others for his choices. I don't want people like that around me. My mother and Mike are blocked too. Mike sent more messages mocking and insulting me, and I just blocked him. My mother was upset about her community shunning her and her marriage falling apart, and I just told her to take care before blocking her. My grandfather is staying with us for a while to support me. He's the best and has read some of your comments, though he won't admit he's flattered. It's been a few days, and things are calm. Lucas is spoiling me, and I'll start therapy soon. I know this isn't the drama-filled, vengeful update you expected, but it's what I've got. I'll let you know if anything changes. Thanks for the love and support. I'm signing off for now. Goodbye. That's all OP had to share.